when you look back, one gets a feeling like, you
Yeah.
know, earlier you wanted to, your sculptures, I mean, to be an intervention into the physical space.
Yeah.
I mean, the environment in some sense. But now, I mean, it exists as sculptures in physical space. But at the same time, it's also about some kind of drama unfolding inside you.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's not all about objects in space,
No.
which your earlier works were about. But it's also about things happening within oneself.
Yeah.
I mean, your movement, your stillness are all also realities of the mind, not simply physical events unfolding outside. So this probably, in a sense, has changed. That's why your work is halfway, I mean, exists in actual space, but somewhere there's a kind of a conceptualization or conceptualized notions about art, which is kind of coming into this thing, and which probably has happened more in your most recent thing. I mean, and also, I mean, one gets a feeling, I mean, like you called it liminal space and liminal figures, liminal space, these are the terms that have come along. So one gets a feeling it's, I mean, you are also not interested in defining these things too much. I mean, like you don't believe in, you know, that this could be, one could be white, one could be black or kind of thing. I mean, you're more interested in the ambivalences, you are more interested in the kind of in-between things. And you think a lot of reality is in this in-between, I mean, gray areas and that kind of thing. And a lot of human life seems to be happening there for you.
Because, you know, this kind of things can never be kind of with a kind of a concluding statement as such, because it's, I mean, I think I want people to be more participating than, and not to sort of to stay with a kind of a curtain falling, you know,
and the message
or
received.
anything, but it's kind of taking people along with my people, you know, in one way, you know, when you, especially when this sculpture that we are sitting against, you know, that here the whole composition pattern has been changed from the large work that I wanted to do. There, you know, I was thinking that, you know, on the real ramp, when real people were walking, you know, it could not have been possible with large number of crowd walking. I mean, you know, it could be individual even walking on the thing, because there are hundreds of pillars and, you know, the figures in space. But here, I was sort of bringing the whole thing into a different format, where I wanted hundreds of people, a thick population going, because and restricting the number of, you know, people on the pillars, because I think, you know, there are 7 pillars here, and here, you know, there are hundreds of people. I think this is sculptural, one way of, you know, bringing out a kind of a visually, you would really see that the contrast of that larger than life figures, and then you have this tiny, you know. But here, you know, what happens is that the whole flow, is a kind, there is a collective flow where people are moved. And also there is an individual movement. And they are distinctly, you know, individually they are generating that movement was very intentional for the reason that their individuality is retained, yet there is a kind of a flow, the very flow to reach out to a different. Now what happens is that the whole composition is definitely drawn from the very idea of making it, and also the kind of, you know, the theatrical atmosphere that had to be also created. And then why again indoor? Many people, it's not just because of the maintenance problems or anything as such. It is meant to be seen, you know, because it's meant to be walking along. And anything which is seen from too far, this work probably may not make much of an impact. It is meant to be really seen a kind of an enclosed, limited space where you really tend to become a kind of a part. You become, you know, one with the character as one of those that you really, and also why it's being conceived as a long piece. It's also because of this distance that you cover. You know, a kind of a few steps maybe it is. Even that few steps counts too. And I could have made a square, I could be making all those, but it doesn't, the purpose doesn't serve, because just that I have seen whenever this work was viewed by anybody, they really tend to be standing for a while, and then they move. And that that energy that it gives you to move, and then come close to. Here also the pillar gets vanished.
Yeah, that's right.
And you know, from the very horizontal figure, a taking off figure to a kind of a landing figure, you know, there is a kind of not, the movements are not drawn from any yogas or any kind of thing, but just because of their movements that generated from within. And as a result, it becomes, you can see a kind of a sequential evolving movements that comes to a kind of a geometrical, you know, extremely symmetrical, I would say, to a landing space. But I'm not talking about what is further, but I think it's something that you really have a kind of a, you are defining a space beyond with a wall or a door or and then, you know, it's not, I mean, I think it's more of an experience from the expression, you know, and then you, from that experience, whatever people, you know, it's a kind of a sharing of an experience. I only spoke about what I would intend, what was the intentions behind of how you wanted this to be seen, how you wanted this to be shared by the people, and why is it so long in structure, and these were the kind of things. So what I was talking about is basically in terms of what was the kind of, where was the whole structure coming and came to this thing,
But in a sense, I was just thinking that when, of course, it was meant to be a sculpture which was large and in the environment. Then, since it didn't work out, you kind of miniaturized and it turned into a sculpture for the indoor. But in the process, another thing that happened, these small figures should have been actual real people in the actual, if you had managed to that large environmental thing. And now the viewer has a different position in relation to the whole thing. The viewer is not the small person, but imagines to be that small person. So the sculpture becomes, interestingly, not something that you'd physically react in that sense. I mean, not on the same human scale, but something you thinks about, ponders about, views. I mean, I think that is where you said that walking and then when your viewers stop. And even as we were talking, I mean, this was happening. I mean, you know, there were people walking, and then people would stop for a moment, and then they would look, and you know. So what happens is this whole process of viewing in relation to the structure of the sculpture, which is interesting. I mean, probably when somebody walks in, this whole idea of something which was meant to be a large thing and then miniaturized into indoor sculpture doesn't, I mean, strike them. But in the way they view, probably the consequences are visible in a sense, which is a very interesting thing to do. But and I don't know where you're going to go from here, because I think you're a sculptor in the making still. I mean, I think so. I mean, it would be quite interesting to, I mean, look forward to, because I think I don't want you to spell it out, because probably you don't know where you're going to go. But we would all be looking forward to seeing where it's going to take you next. Okay, thank you very much.